Welcome to the the Customer Success Leadership Roundtable. I'm Andrew Marks, the co-founder of Success Hacker and our Success Coaching training program. And we're back for our monthly live webcast today talking about customer health scores. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success development training with nearly 20,000 students globally on our skills development platform. Our programs are available in a variety of formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps. And we're accepting registrations for all of our virtual instructor-led programs through the end of the year. We still have a few seats left for our level 2 boot camp next month, led by yours truly, and our change management for customer success and outcome-based selling boot camps in December. Ashley's going to drop some coupon codes in chat for a few of our upcoming boot camps. We're also now taking registrations for our spring coaching programs being offered in partnership with the University of San Francisco, and we'll be posting the rest of our 2023 training schedule on our website sometime in the next few weeks. Find out more at successcoaching.co. Now, for those of you that haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success leaders. Regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, the size of your customers, your teams deal with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. The schedule for upcoming events can also be found at successcoaching.co. Click on that events tab at the top of the page to find out more. Once again, I also need you to do me a favor right now and please participate in that short survey that we're running about our CSLR topics for next year. We've gotten a number of requests and we need to narrow down our topics for 2023 because we only got 12 slots. So I just need you all to take 2 minutes, click on that link that Ashley just dropped in the chat, and select your top 6 topics from the roughly 20 of them that we've provided. Now for a few housekeeping items. Before we get started, this webinar is recorded and we'll be posting a replay along with a transcript on our website early next week. We will be taking questions later on during the webinar, so please don't be shy and use that Q&A button down at the bottom of your screen to ask your own question or upvote one that's already there. We're also broadcasting on LinkedIn Live, and we've got somebody monitoring that feed. Thank you, Tracy. So if you have questions watching on LinkedIn, please post them and they will be relayed to us. Also, please keep all commentary to the chat window. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. In this series, we focus on practical real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those working with or leading customer success teams on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite 3 panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are and what they do, and let's get started as usual in alphabetical order with Ariel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. Really excited to be part of the panel here. So my name is Ariel. I'm VP of Customer Success at a DevSecOps startup called Flowsome. I have about 25 years of experience leading customer-facing teams at various software companies, going all the way back to the on-premise days up to the SaaS world that we live in today. I've been in customer success since 2015, where I built the first customer success team at a B2B division of Experian. Really decided I love customer success, and I've focused on it ever since then. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion today.
Awesome. Thanks, Ariel. David, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. David Mangum. I'm the head of global customer success for Tech Experts. We're a business process outsourcing company around the globe. Just recently joined that as of last week. Prior to that, I was running the customer success and global operations team for Zoll Medical, a medical solutions provider. Got 20 plus years in customer facing and customer success roles in various industries, healthcare, telecommunications, unified communications, as well as various other business improvement companies, things like product management solutions, things like that. So really excited today. I've created multiple customer success teams, in some cases from scratch, and really looking forward to the discussion today.
Awesome. Thanks, David. Thanks for joining us. And last but certainly not least, a friend of the program, somebody I love having conversations with, Shari.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you. My name is Shari Srebnick. I am currently a principal analyst at Forrester Research, focusing specifically on customer success. Prior to my joining Forrester, I was the head of customer success at a MarTech company. We were SEO software, and I've spent the better part of the last decade in customer success. But similar to Ariel and David, I've spent my entire career in customer-facing roles, but pivoted more towards customer success some years ago, and I've never looked back. But in my role now, it's definitely interesting, and I'm really excited to be able to evangelize customer success from the vantage point that I sit in now, and really talk to more people and learn more about CS and get the message out there.
And I'm really excited that you're in that role too, knowing who you are and how you evangelize. I very much enjoy it. You really know how to kind of establish your your perspective. So
thank you. I'm a good evangelizer.
You are a great evangelizer. Once again, though, I appreciate the time that you're all spending with us today. So now let's get to the topic at hand. Many out there in the customer success world believe that one of the best ways to keep track of your customers and their journeys is through the use of health scores. Is that really the case? It seems like a lot of work to ensure that we're looking at the right data points in the right way so that we can learn something meaningful about our customers and take action when necessary. One would think that effort be focused elsewhere to produce a bigger impact. Why are health scores so important, and what are the real benefits?
Yeah, I think it's one of the tools in the toolbox, right? I think health scores by themselves are very reactive. No matter how you build them, there's going to be some reactive component to it, because by the time the health score changes, something has already happened, and then we're reacting to it. It's better than not having a health score, but we have to be careful how we build them, and we have to be using other things other than just the health score for sure.
Yeah, just to echo that comment, it is one component of a much larger picture that it plays an important role, but it is not the be-all, end-all of the customer experience and how you measure it. So I think to Ariel's point, yeah, you can look at it, use it wisely, look for some actionable intelligence, but you have to go beyond just the health score to really understand managing risk, what's going on with your customer experience.
I agree with both of you. I'm not, to complete the trifecta there. We all agree on that. And to both your points, it's an indicator. I've seen in my own experience too many leaders try to put all of their eggs in the health score basket, and it's just one piece of the puzzle that, while to your point, Ariel, it is slightly reactive because it's already happened. It's still giving you some bit of proactivity and saying, okay, this signal just flared. What do we do? Is it something we need to, in terms of risk, do we need to mitigate? Or is this now an opportunity? And you can use it to see trends and uncover those pieces and have more evaluation, but it's not something you should lean on 100%, because I think that'll get you into trouble.
And I think related to that trend comment is looking at how over time the broad base of customers is moving. Are people moving in a positive sense? Are they moving in a negative sense? Versus ABC company has a health score of green, yellow, red, and oh my God, we got to do something about it. Sometimes it's good to take a step back and say, what's the overall trend of where our customer experience is going, and then look for areas that you want to do a deeper dive on.
So I'm going to add to that. I would actually say too, when you're looking at those trends, does that seem accurate? When you can look at CSM Sentiment also. If those trends seem inaccurate to what's really happening, then that's a great time to say, okay, we need to look back at the data and what's happening here. Did we choose the wrong indicators? Is the data unclean? Do we need to have better hygiene, depending on what bucket those trends are coming from? So I think it can be, like you said, you can use it in two different ways. Is this what's really happening across our customer base, or is it wildly inaccurate?
Well, I think that's where your statements about it being only a piece of the puzzle is so important. We can't be wholly dependent on health scores, but I'm going to have to disagree a little bit on the reactive comment that you made, Ariel. I agree. You can't be totally proactive when it comes to data, because whatever the data is telling you hasn't been written yet, right? It hasn't happened yet, right? But at the same time, there are ways in which you can incorporate into health scores leading indicators. We've got these lagging indicators of churn and revenue and NPS and customer sat, right? And so we want to have an effect on those, and the best way to have an effect on those is to be kind of measuring the pulse of the things that are happening farther upstream that have an effect on those, right? So yeah, I guess there's a certain amount of reactivity, but there's always going to be a certain amount of reaction, right?
Yeah, and I think related to that, if you can identify, when you build out your health score, you're going to have certain criteria that's going to flow in there. Some of those are going to be lagging indicators, but also look for some of the leading indicators. When I first started out looking at building my latest health scorecard, the leadership had asked for 18 different points, which is crazy in my book. We boiled it down to like 3 or 4. And one of the areas to really, from my perspective, to focus on was adoption, because that would really be a trigger, a leading indicator of problems down the road. If they're not hitting customers not hitting certain adoption milestones, even though they may be quote unquote happy at the time, that's going to create problems down the road. So we need to do something about that, get a play in place to drive better adoption, things like that. So you can have those leading indicators in there, but I do think you have to have the proper mix of criteria in a health score to achieve that, yeah. What you're talking about, Andrew.
And to your point, David, too, you just said, they may be happy at the time. And I just wanted to zero in on that for a second, because ultimately, I am a believer. There's a lot of talk about customer happiness. I don't care if you're happy. I care if you're successful. And those two things don't always go hand in hand, because sometimes the customers that seem to grumble, so to speak, the most could be the ones that you have the best relationship with, that stay the longest, because they're not afraid to tell you when the baby's ugly or they're having a problem. And it's a really nice give and take relationship. So like you said, maybe happy. I don't care if they're happy. Oh, we're great right now. We don't need you. You might. We have to, and now you have to figure out the right play in which to get involved.
Well, you have to back that up, right?
All of the research shows that there's a very tenuous relationship between CSAT happiness and churn, right? So, I mean, if you read like the effortless experience, it goes into that. So, and I think we can all anecdotally think of happy customers that churn and unhappy customers that continue to renew year after year. Mm-hmm. I actually had a customer leave when I started at Flowsome back in Q2, a very large enterprise client, and on the way out the door, they raved about how great our customer success function was. So, I mean, they were very happy, but they weren't getting the appropriate amount of value, and it wasn't getting communicated up the chain. So I actually agree with David, what you were saying before about building those leading indicators into it. I think, adoption is a good one of those, as you mentioned. I think, I've done similar things building health scores, but I still think at the end of the day, there is a bit of a lag. So Andrew, I'm going to have to just agree to disagree with you there. I think no matter how we build them, no matter what leading indicators, unless we're doing something through data science, it's always going to be somewhat lagging. I mean, I've built churn probability scores before using like 5 years of historical data in Salesforce, and those are very accurate predicting churn. But health scores are always going to be somewhat reactive, I think. I noticed somebody in the comments disagreed as well, but
that's okay. Remember, I don't care if you disagree. I don't care if you disagree with me. This is all about sharing our perspectives, right? So, though there was one, and I thought you were going to go this way, Sherry. What about the health score? You needing to adapt the health score based on where your customer is in their journey, right? So David, in your case, you've got a customer where adoption. You've got a health score element that makes up adoption. That becomes incredibly important in the onboarding phase. But once your customer is 2, 3, 4 years into their journey, adoption becomes less of an issue, and there are other things that become more important. So what about kind of the evolving of that health score over time?
Maturity. You have to, because what might look, you might have a health score for what your onboarding phase. So let's just say, for argument's sake, your onboarding is 90 days, right? And like, I know implementation could take longer, but for the sake of this, it's 90 days. What does that look like? What is a healthy customer moving through onboarding look like? And that might be, features adopted, like along with which is connected back to their use cases of why they invested in certain success milestones. Have they, how often they're using it, or, a couple of other indicators, but that is going to shift when they've moved out of onboarding and they're in that next phase of their life cycle, right? And what does it look like a year or two from now? To your point, Andrew, it's not going to be the same thing. It might be a different level of usage or consumption. It might be maybe more use case driven. So you could put it in like an ROI bucket. What does that look like? You have to have a different level of maturity depending on where the customer is in their relationship with you.
Yeah, I think not only where they are in the journey, but by segment as well. You need a different health score. Like the health score for an enterprise client is going to be vastly different than the health score for a small or medium business client.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. And it also can differ by different personas within that. I mean, depending on your solution, you may have a person using one part of your solution that has a completely different set of expectations on desired outcomes. And if you're not achieving those, that could put the overall solution at risk. So it's not only where you are in the journey, but the different people or the different personas within that use your solution that it's important to look at and kind of create a profile or a success profile or benchmark to say this is where a successful customer should be at this point in time based on this role and where they are, where they need to be going.
Now, who was it that we were talking about? Was it Boaz, who's combined kind of the customer maturity with with the health score?
Yeah, so I sent a link to Ashley. I don't know if she can put it in the chat, but it came from a series of, actually it came out of CS 100, but there was a series of articles that he wrote, which was called Why Your Health Score Might Be Quite Useless.
Yeah, she just dropped it in the chat.
Yeah, that's great. So, I've done this maturity modeling now at 5 different companies, and it really does add a lot to your health score because it takes the health score and the maturity index and it combines them, and it puts your customers, if you think about like a grid with, 2x2 grid, it puts them into different buckets. So you have your customers that are likely to grow, your customers that you should let churn, customers you should save, et cetera. So it really helps inform your CSMs about where they should be spending their time. It helps your AMs figure out where they should be spending their time. Highly recommend it to anybody that's building a health score because it really gives you the complete picture when you do the maturity modeling.
And just by the way, just a reminder, folks, please ask some questions. If you got questions, use that Q&A functionality to ask questions to the group here. We're going to keep talking about this for a bit more, but then we're going to open things up for Q&A. Yeah, so basically all this stuff seems super easy.
So easy.
I know it's like, let's just spin stuff up right away. But let's seriously though, this is complex stuff and it can be really overwhelming. I've always been one to kind of err on the side of just getting something, right? Let's get something out there. Let's put a stake in the ground. Let's start somewhere, right? So what are some of the questions that you should ask yourself? And we've talked a couple of these, but what are some of the questions you should ask yourself before you kind of start going down this health score building process, or even revisiting your existing health score?
I would say the first thing is, what are you trying to achieve? Define what you are trying to achieve with the health score, first and foremost. From there, I would say start simple and iterate based on, are you getting the answers that you are looking for? And do you have the data to provide those answers?
I like the data question. I'm a data nerd myself. That's super important. Not all the data that you have is worth actually analyzing, and there may be pieces of data that you need that you don't have.
Yeah, I mean, what's the acronym? KISS? Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
It's really easy to over-engineer these things. You want all the data. I want all the things, and then it just becomes just a big soup of stuff that doesn't really give you any indication of what you need to do. So start small. I always like to say 3. You could go 3 to 5, but 3 is, I always go by the rule of 3, but 3 to 5, keep it really simple and use data that you have, right? What do you have at your fingertips at this moment? To David's point, first thing, actually, I'll go backwards, is say you need an objective. What is it you're trying to accomplish? What are you going to do with that data? What is it going to help you do? And you need to understand the why before you can say the what, and then have your playbooks and processes lined up. But you start small because you want to keep an eye on it. What does it look like after a quarter? Is it giving you the right indication of things that are happening? Churn, opportunity, and keeping it simple into those 2 buckets. If not, then what do you need to tweak? Or maybe it's a simple, okay, it's mostly accurate. Maybe it's the weighting of the metrics that you put in there. You have to play around with how you've prioritized the weighting on those. And it's not, the data's fine. It's just things are a little off. So I think start small and keep your eye on it, but have the objective so that you can drive it. And also talk once you have it going, you want to also be able to evangelize it in a way that's really simple for others to understand.
Yeah, you have to keep tweaking it. I think that's kind of the bottom line. And you have to measure the correlation between churn and red health scores. And if it's not there, something's wrong. And you can't assume that just because it's working this quarter, that it's going to be working next quarter, right? You have to keep continually measuring it to make sure that it's accurate, because things can change.
I also think an important element of any good health score is to make sure that we're focused on data that not only we have access to, but that we can have an effect on.
Well, Andrew, actually, I was just getting ready to go there. You've got to be able to use this as actionable intelligence that you can really take to drive whatever the messaging is for, that this needs to change, or this is what our customers are saying. Just a health score for the sake of a health score is not going to get you anywhere.
Yeah, coming from a data background, I remember going into board meetings at some of my largest customers when I was at Business Objects, and I was kind of considered at the time one of the gurus on executive dashboards, and so I would go in and I have these meetings with these executive teams, and and we were in the process of building out executive dashboards for them. They'd throw these dashboards up on the overhead. This was like, I'm dating myself, but this is back when there was an actual overhead projector,
a real overhead,
right? A real overhead projector, and they'd throw it up on the wall, and I would go to the wall, I'd go to the whiteboard, and I just start crossing things out. I'm like, what can you do if this turns red? What are you going to do about it? If this falls below this threshold, what are you going to do about it? You want KPIs that are meaningful, but also you can have some effect on. Otherwise, what's the point, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've found is spending, and it's also how you frame the data to your audience. I found that I had a lot of reluctance and pushback and questioning on data when I didn't frame it in the right perspective. I framed it more on specific to the product and not the solution. And by solution, I define it as the product itself, the experience, the customer experience you go through, as well as the ROI or the value you get out of that. Because this was a painful lesson for me. When I brought this data, health data, into our board meetings and said, we have a problem here because things are trending red, and it was focused on the product, people started pushing back left and right. When I went back later and focused on the solution and saying it's more than just the product, it's these other areas, and let me dig in and show you where we need to focus on, all of a sudden people were receptive. And to your point, it became usable data to make a difference in the customer experience. So how you frame it is important.
How you frame it is very important, for sure. Do any of you, and I know this is, I probably already know the answer to this question, but does anybody have a specific framework or approach that you regularly use to develop your health scores?
Well, I can tell you
beyond the KISS analogy.
I can speak to it from two aspects. One, from personal experience, but also even we at Forrester, there has been some research on how to think about it. And it's really the framework that I've used in the past. So it's not that different. I want to think about, value. What is essential to delivering that value? What metrics? Do I need to form a hypothesis around what value and determine what elements of the customer experience that uniquely deliver value? Are those things I can measure? How do I add that? How do I add that in there? What changes as the customer matures? We talked about this before, right? How does the customer's definition of success change as they move from like onboarding and or implementation to now into that groove of using it throughout their organization? What data can we access for this, right? Again, we've all been saying this. What do you have right now that you don't need to wait on? You can, and if you're not sure, you can talk to some of your engineers or whoever is like the owner of all of the tech stack that the company uses. And, you can look at what data points you have available. If you have a customer success platform, you can, what data flows into there already. You've likely already done that. And do you need anything additional to help capture it? Like, do you have product usage data? Right. Is that going to be in there? So I kind of look at those buckets and think, what do I have? What can I use? What's going to tell me? What is the value proposition of my company? What do we measure success on? And let's get those 3 or 4 metrics in there. Let me look at the weighting. Let me make sure I understand what I think the priority is, and then get something rolling.
I think that data, I think your comments on data are super important. And you can't be shy with your team about asking for data that is lacking. I mean, this is important stuff, right? So if there are critical pieces of data that you believe that you as a leader need in order to really show and demonstrate the health of a customer, don't be shy about asking for that. You should definitely ask for that. How long it takes and whether you get it are a different story. But I think you can, to David's point, I think you can tell a story around why this stuff's important. Ario, you were about to weigh in. I think I may have interrupted you.
No problem, Andrew. So I think one of the kind of basic things to do, and I'm not a big fan of chasing churn and spending a lot of time understanding why customers churn, but I think to build a health score, you do need to know the basic data points of what is common when a customer has churned. So you do have to go back and look at it. So did usage go down? Did they not pay their bills? Things like that you probably have data points on in Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using, and then use that to build your health score, because anything in that health score needs to be actionable, right? I mean, usage goes down, engagement with the client, like number of meetings goes down, something like that. We can fix those problems, right? But we need to see what's common among our churned customers. That's the starting point that's where I've started when I've built these health scores in the past.
The other, I want to piggyback on that. That access to data, and the more that can be automated, makes it so much easier. And almost if you look at, two different data points, one that can be automated versus one that's going to be, a manual process, you may want to default to the automated data piece, assuming it provides the data to answer your questions, because I've found personally just really getting bogged down in, I got all my different data points, but trying to pull it all together. And if it's not in a way that becomes much more manageable, you come up with, the data gets old fairly quickly over time. And, it's not really valid, almost to your very early point, Ariel, about, it's reactionary. Well, if it takes you so long to calculate a health score, that time has passed that you can't take action to it, that's a problem and you need to fix that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, David. I think, one of the things I don't know if I can plug the company, Andrew, you let me know, but one of the things we're doing at Flowsome right now, we purchased an AI tool that automatically generates the health score for us. And it's very interesting. It takes data from all over Salesforce, HubSpot, other places where we're storing data, and it learns. It uses machine learning to understand why our clients are churning and what are some of those leading indicators for why clients are churning. And it's found some really astounding stuff for us. Like, we found some things that could happen during implementation, for example, that lead to a customer or a higher probability of a customer churning. We found certain segments churn more than others. I mean, it's been extremely helpful for us, and it took most of the work out of building it. So,
Yeah.
I think
What's you can share the name of the tool if you like. You're
Sure.
not working for them, so.
No, it's called Involve.ai. It's a newer tool, but it's been really kind of a game changer for us in building these things. So just because it looks at more data, right? I think what we've all said is that when you're building a health score manually, you do need to keep it simple. I know I've tried to build one with 12 inputs in it, and when you get to that point, it becomes very difficult to continually update it and make sure that it's accurate. 3 to 5, as Sherry said, makes a lot more sense. With the tool we're using, though, we have like 15 inputs into it, and the system can just use AI to process all of it.
One last thing before we get to questions, and we've already got 10 in there. And by the way, I'm going to ask Ashley to share that link again for our survey, because there's 168 of you on, and we've only got 52 responses. So I'm going to keep pushing for some input. Objective versus subjective data elements. Well, what's your take on that? Should there be more weight to one versus the other? How do you deal with objective versus subjective?
Or quantitative versus qualitative?
Quantitative versus qualitative, whatever.
I think the CSM sentiment is actually a really important component. I think it shouldn't be underestimated or not weighted highly, just because CSMs, if they're doing their job, are the closest to the customers and should really know what the state of a customer is. So that would be my advice, is to give that a high weight in your health score.
I would second that. We leaned heavily, especially out of the gate, when we first started with a health scorecard, of leveraging that CSM sentiment, because if they are engaging on a regular basis, we're hearing directly from the customer and capturing some of that qualitative feedback that goes, and honestly, that's one of those other key channels, if you will, of customer feedback that we use. And you can't discount what you're hearing from your customers. It's so valuable that we definitely utilize that quite a bit. It's great to have the metrics and the numbers, but it's the qualitative that tells the story behind the numbers and the why, if you will.
I'll even caveat that, add a piece in there. It's great. Like you said, CSM sentiment, I 100% believe in it, because the CSMs are the ones with the customers all the time. Mm-hmm. But I'd also want to balance that out. Like, if they're talking to the end user, making sure that there's also the relationship and a thread back to who's ever got influence over the renewal or the decision, whether that the executive sponsor, because you also want to make sure that they're telling you everything's okay, and then you have a completely different opinion from the executive. And you can do that in a number of different ways. But I just think there still needs to be a balance in how you look at that, because we've all seen that. Everything's great, they churn because the executive sponsor was like, no, plug pulled. And you're like, but yet yesterday we were like hugging, like we're good. And so there's got to be a way to balance that out too.
But
100%.
CS have to have those, they have to have those relationships. I mean, that's a basic CS function. If they don't, something else is dysfunctional in the organization, in my opinion.
Sure. Well, that could be
Well,
part of your
yeah.
health score, relationships. Do you have a
Right.
champion?
That is, yeah. In that
Yeah, for sure.
engagement, what level are you engaging at in the organization? And that and I can't remember, one of you mentioned it earlier, are you articulating the value that your solution is bringing to the customers all along that whole chain of, users up to key decision makers? If you're just, if we had a billing solution, if you're only talking to the biller and they're like, yeah, this makes my world great, but the VP of revenue doesn't see the value out of it, guess what? You're probably not going to get funding for next year.
Yeah, it's got to be the value that whatever they decide the value is. So,
Exactly.
There's a few types of value. So for the CFO, it would be financial value, but it might be a different type, an experiential type of value, which we have research on, for the end user. So you have to understand, like, who you're talking to. It should be geared towards that persona.
Well, I think the cautionary tale here also is that it's in that example, Ariel, I believe you brought it up. It was one of your customers that churned right after you had joined. If the people in charge didn't understand or the value that was being delivered, then is that a failure? That's a failure of customer success team.
Yeah.
So the qualitative versus quantitative, I agree with all you, but everybody on the team needs to understand, what does that mean? What is a good relationship? What are good interactions? What is a good channel of communication? What does that really mean?
Yeah,
because for each CSM, that could be different, and we all got to be on the same page.
Yeah, with the client I brought up, it was exactly what Sherry said, where we didn't have that executive relationship with a C-level person who came in and got rid of the software. That's why we have those relationships now, but it was a problem in the past. But I mean, that's just basic customer success function, to have those relationships and make sure that the value is getting communicated up the chain. I think that's often the piece that gets forgotten when we do this. Exactly.
All right. Awesome. Great discussion. Let's get to some questions. And just a reminder for everybody, we do go until 15 past the hour. So if you can stick around, we will continue to ask questions. Answer questions. We will be taking these questions based on most upvotes first, followed by most recent. So if you see a question on that list and you really want that question answered, now would be the time for you to upvote. Our first question comes from Kimberly. Kimberly, thank you for the question. Kimberly asks, when you create a customer health score, how do you determine everybody's upvoting? So tossed around. When you create a customer health score, how do you determine and highlight which red customers or yellow customers to go after aggressively to retain, and which customers to let go because you have already lost them and the ROI on those efforts won't be that good? It looks like Shari, you want to jump in on this right out of the gate?
Sure. I could see, I think both David and Ariel probably want to say stuff too. We've all got some. So I'll speak from experience on this. Yeah. That's a great one, because you're like, oh, the first thought that most people do is, where is the most ARR? And you kind of default to that. But I don't necessarily agree with that, because I think you need to look at what kind of relationship you have. You kind of have to zoom out a little bit and understand what's the bigger picture with this customer. Where they might have the most ARR of your red customers, but what if they weren't the right fit? Maybe it's, you have to eat that, but then we start to look at, where we can make that up in other places. But I think, everyone zooms into the red to say what's happening here. And it's Jack Nicholson yelling, we have a code red, and everyone's flipping out. But I think you have to zoom out. What's happening with this customer? Are they the right fit? Do we have bigger issues? Have they said we are churning? We've already signed with somebody else. You need to kind of know those things, so you know where to direct your efforts, because it's a cost. It's a human cost. It's a financial cost to throw all your resources into trying to save someone just because they spend, out of all your customers at risk, they spend the most money. Where are you going to get the most bang for your buck? Is it something you can work on? Is there propensity to not just get them to renew to fix that, but is their propensity to maybe grow? Like what is that like? Can you move the yellows to green? Why are they yellow? And what does the red look like? So I think you need to have a little bit more discernment about what that relationship and what that customer looks like, because sometimes you just have to be like, I'll sign the divorce papers too, because it's better for everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Sherry said. I think that this is where the maturity modeling also comes into play, because if you're actually doing that, you'll know exactly which customers you should just let churn.
David, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I would say what we used to do is really look at taking that step back and what is the likelihood in doing an assessment. If we're to invest in this customer, what is that likelihood of turning them around? And sometimes that's related to the time to renew. If it's very short, they're not happy, something's missing in the roadmap, you're not going to get it in time. Don't move heaven and earth to try to save that customer when you know you're going to come up short. So invest your time and effort on the right customers, as Sherry and Ariel said. It's critical because we all have limited resources.
And one quick thing too, sometimes if you do go crazy and you do save them, it's often a Band-Aid you've put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. And now you have them for, say, let's just say average contract is for a year. And now you're going to have this, you're putting resources towards someone that's still going to churn in a year. You didn't really save them. You were looking at it for the wrong reasons. And now you've got you've done a capacity plan. Now you're putting capacity towards somebody that doesn't belong there anyway.
Right.
And there's a cost to other customers.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because could that effort be applied to other customers that are in a good place that could generate even more upside for you?
I know this can somewhat be controversial, but going back to customer fit and starting there, to me, is a great way to do that, because if it was not a good fit to begin with, and the reason I say controversial, sometimes sales, I know in my personal history, there's been battles between us and sales. And if you have I'm going to call it a misfit customer, you're always going to be putting more and more effort on that. And sometimes looking at customer profitability is a way to look at that and say, you know what, it's going to cost us this amount of effort to keep the customer. It's not worth it, because I have another customer that they just hum along because it's a great fit. They're using our product the way they should be. They're achieving their desired outcomes. Let's keep looking for those types of customers and focus on taking care of them.
Well, and I think you're going to, I honestly am starting to see and hear grumblings of companies moving more towards that, right? It's not anymore about growth at all costs.
Right.
They're looking at EBITDA margin as being a lot more important piece of that whole rule of 50, rule of 40 puzzle than just growth at all costs. Growth at all costs doesn't necessarily mean, hey, if I got 100% growth, but I've got, negative 40% margin, my rule of 50 or rule of 40 still says 60, but I'm losing money.
Yeah.
Right. We have to be smart about this. We have to be fiscally responsible. And if we're throwing good money after bad at a bad fit customer with no end game in sight, and that end game could be, hey, we want to move into their market, so we're going to make this, it's an investment, right? So we're going to earn all of our war wounds with this particular customer, so we can learn and we can evolve the product, we can evolve our positioning, what have you. Might be just a ton of really good reasons, but more times than not, there's not. They just wanted to sign a customer so that they could hit their quarterly numbers,
quota. Yeah.
Their quota. So,
well, and I think to that point, sometimes, and when I was with Zoll, we were a healthcare company in the emergency services space. We had our customers as well as our team had a mindset of, you have to save every customer. And come to find out, that is not the case.
No, not at all.
And that is sometimes can be very hard for people to accept.
Yeah, of course. Really is. And by the way, that your attitude, your perspective, your strategy changes as you grow, as you mature. We talk about customer maturity. We have to talk about our own maturity as well. So, we have to also, be okay with the fact that in an early stage company, you are doing everything you can to acquire logos. You were doing unnatural acts. And I've been through it all. I've been through the early stage to the late stage, And there's some crazy stuff that you do in early stage companies. And even though it's painful, there's some justification to it. Right. So there's no one size fits all for that. Kimberly, thank you for your question. Let's move on. David, thank you for the question. David asks, what are the heaviest metrics for you when building a health score? Ario, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand what heaviest means, but I'm making an assumption here. So there are really two that I've used in every health score I've ever built, two quantitative ones, in addition to the qualitative one of the CSM Sentiment. But the two quantitative ones, one of them is the change in product usage. So the delta between what normal usage is it going up or is it going down? Did it change in the last week, month, whatever you decide to measure? So that's one that almost always indicates something in a health score. The other one is engagement, also used kind of the same way. Is it trending up or is it trending down? And by engagement, I mean number of emails between the customer and the CSMs, number of support tickets, number of meetings that they've had, and kind of aggregate that into one engagement score. So if it goes way down all of a sudden, that's usually indicative of a problem. So, but you have to have the baseline, right? So it's not one size fits all. It's what does the trend look like?
David, Sherry, you got anything to add? Okay.
Not really. Yeah. He nailed
awesome.
it. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're moving along here. David, thanks for the question. Our next question comes from Karen. Karen asks, how do you collect CSM sentiment? How often does that get collected, and what automations can be put in place to manage that collection? David, looks like you want to jump in on this.
Yeah. So we had the challenge when we first started this of just kind of being all over, just talk to as many people as you can. What we then migrated to is a customer segmentation strategy that had the engagement to measure that CSM sentiment baked into that. So if you're a top tier customer, you're measuring that we would do it on a quarterly basis it was automated within Salesforce so that a date would be set in there. And if you didn't update that by a certain date, you would be out of compliance, and you would you would track it in there. So we broke that out based on the size of the customer, based on the segment of the customer, and track that in an automated fashion. And that way we would, you could go in there and put, we'll call it out of schedule sentiment updates, because sometimes things don't exactly change, or you don't want to wait when something dramatic changes, but at least you know that you are tracking all your customers on a previously agreed upon cadence. So that would keep your data fresh and accurate. And you could see where maybe, some CSMs are not up to par on what they were doing, and those become coaching opportunities.
And so was I love that. I love the compliance
yes.
Component of that. So was that, did you have a component of their variable comp plan around compliance?
We actually did. Yeah.
I know. I think I've done that before as well. I think it's a strong motivator.
Yeah, I mean, it's, sometimes people ask me, should they be comped on the health assessment? And I answer, they should be comped on the action of the health assessment, not necessarily the result itself. The result itself can be impacted by product issues.
Exactly.
All that, but it is their responsibility to do a check-in. I hate to use the term check-in, but do an assessment of the health. And have those conversations, not just, hey, how's it going, but have those, structured conversations to create a accurate sentiment, and then make sure that gets input. In our case, it was Salesforce, but whatever tool you're using, and keep that up to date. And that's something that should be compensated.
Love that. Love that.
So the term check-in is actually banned at my company.
Good.
We don't use that.
Good. I wax poetic regularly, especially in training courses, about the whole, hey, just checking in is something that immediately ends up in the trash for me. You might be able to get there with particular customers that you've got really well-established relationships with, but that should not be something in your regular kind of bag of communication tricks. Sherry, you got anything to add?
Okay.
No, I think that was covered. I mean, I'm not going to say anything that David and Ariel didn't really say already.
Okay. Awesome. All right, David, can you hit the done button on that,
Yep.
please? Thank you. All right, moving on. And we've got roughly a little less than 20 minutes. Let's see if we can get through the rest of these. Simon asks, are customer health scores on any of your C-suite scorecards, and do you think they should be? And it looks like, David, you want to weigh in on this out of the gate?
Yeah, so I actually had the customer health scores and trends on our corporate dashboard, and we utilize that as part of a monthly corporate-wide, I called it a PACE meeting, providing awesome customer experience, which was a cross-departmental review of the customer experience. Health score was a component of that, and we'd have other components such as some survey stuff. I won't get into the details of that, but the health score did play an important role in that, because that was something that we could take a look at and really drive conversation around areas for improvement.
Sherry, Ariel, what about you? You guys have, in the past, Sherry and Ariel, have you made that a component of your C-suite?
I don't. Yeah, I don't. I think, CEO cares about revenue. I mean, that's what I'm focusing on when I'm presenting to a board or to a C-level, is revenue. I might use health score and some other things to kind of back up some assumptions that I'm making, but it's never going to be the focus.
Yeah, I'd say there are some executive dashboards where maybe it's not the CEO, but those of us, maybe someone in marketing or someone in sales, we're looking at certain things, but not, I use it, it's almost like the appendix. It's there if I need to refer to it, if you're in that, meeting with the CEO, but to Ariel's point, they care about revenue. I use my analogy of long division. And going back to school, like the teacher just wanted to see the right answer, but maybe you got an extra point or two for showing your work, but they didn't require it. So you could put it there. So that's kind of like the CEO doesn't care, because you got to be careful with those things. You could get into the weeds real easy, especially with a board. And then that's a whole other ball game. So it's, keep it in your back pocket and you should be able to talk to it. But I don't necessarily think it always has to be part of those kinds of meetings.
And let me just share one reason why we did that. This is going back to my previous company. We were very much focused only on the revenue, and our customer experience was a big initiative to improve, because we were really struggling there, which is why it was one of the components in the dashboard of, here is the current assessment of our customer health as it relates to the customer experience. So as part of that initiative.
Going back to having actionable metrics on your scorecards, right? It was something that you were trying to get your team to take action on, right? So you had to expose that. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome, David. Thank you for if you could hit that done button there. Simon, thank you for the question. Our next question comes from Karen. Karen asks, on the engagement score piece, how do you discern between the needy customers and if their engagements are actually valuable to the relationship? Ariel, you want to jump on this?
Yeah, I actually don't make a distinction, because one of the correlations we found through our data science is that the needy customer is healthier in general. Even if they're complaining, the fact that they're engaging with us is always a positive sign. And we found even customers that are entering a lot of support tickets, they're also less likely to churn. So I make no distinction there when creating an engagement score.
Anybody else? Anybody else want to weigh in on that one?
The only thing I would say, it's those customers that go silent are the ones I'm most concerned about.
Yep.
Yeah.
I want to add one thing, and this is somewhat separate. It's part of the score. So if they're super needy, depending on if you look at what kind of tickets they're submitting, you could take that and say, maybe you even have, maybe this is Ariel, it's sort of your maturity model. Do they need a little bit, like you have something for those types of customers, a plan with milestones to kind of raise their level up? So that would be something you could learn from that. If you're seeing we have a segment or certain types of customers that are, you can have we're going to help you get from lower maturity to higher maturity. And that's a whole other thing, but you could still use that to understand how to go about it.
By the way, one more last ask before we lose people at the top of the hour. I dropped the link in again for the survey. So if you haven't taken it before you leave, grab that link at least and weigh in on our topics for next year. Awesome. Thank you, Karen, for the question. Our next question comes from Janelle. Janelle, thanks for the question. I keep hearing the NPS is becoming outdated since it's a snapshot in time that isn't relevant to the overall customer relationship. Do you still feel that NPS is a good tool to include in the overall CHI?
Customer health
index. Sherry, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I feel very passionately about NPS and not in a positive way, but in terms of customer success. So first of all, with any of these things, you need to have any voice of the customer type of thing. You really, truly need to have an objective. And you need to, what are you going to do with the data? As I saw in the chat earlier, the closed feedback loop. You always need to close the loop. Your customers are not lab rats. You have to, they often say, there's survey fatigue. It's not survey fatigue. They're just not confident that you're going to do something with the data, with their time that they're giving you. So put that aside. NPS is a company metric. It is typically used by marketing. I don't find it's necessary. It has ever told me anything about the customer's health or risk of churn. It's great to use on a broader scale, but I don't like it necessarily when it, like I said, as it has to do with customer success, because it's different. Would you recommend us? Now, people also get tied up in those results. You get your promoters. Great, marketing, go do your thing, go run with it. Everyone gets focused on the detractors. Oh my God, they said something bad. I alluded to this earlier. The fact that they told you your baby was ugly and took the time to do it shows that they're still engaged. It's the ones that have not responded, which is where you have to look, because that is where your churn is coming from, because either they're disengaged, might be totally apathetic, that they don't even care. So that is your bigger thing. I think you also need to look at who you're sending it to, because if you're only sending it to your end users, you could be missing a big, this is where risk could come in if you don't get the executive sponsor. So I think you need to, maybe it's in-app for your users, if it's, you have, that kind of thing. And then it needs to go by email to someone that's got influence. Campaign. So because if there's a disconnect between your end user and your executive, now you know what's the playbook for dealing with that. So you need to look at those pieces of the NPS puzzle and make sure that you're doing it. You also don't want to send it out too soon. So there's a lot behind it, but I don't like including it personally in the customer health score because it's not telling me anything about their health.
Yeah, I totally agree with Sherry. And I think the research proves that CSAT and NPS have zero relationship to churn. What we've found through our tool is that just answering the survey at all is an indicator that they're less likely to churn, and that's proven out.
No, I think you're absolutely both right. Keeping it separate is important. I think the other piece is running a campaign at those key decision makers to look at the overall experience with the company is where that belongs, and it's not specific to the health. To your point, Ariel, you just made, if somebody's responding, chances are they have a good level of engagement with you. So you're either understanding what their challenges are and you can work on that. But if anything, take the data I would take away from that is for all those people that didn't respond, find a way to get engaged with them and get more of a deeper relationship, because that is where your problems are going to come.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to your point really quickly about the CSAT not telling you much, well, this is why, and I know this has been talked about outside of this panel, the reason that you're not getting much from that often is because you're asking selfish questions. Oh, look, we did great. Let's all give ourselves a hug. It told you nothing about the customer. What if they're realizing value? It tells you nothing about them. It's just saying, look, guys, we did great. So it's also the way you phrase the questions. And that's often why you don't get much from CSAT, because you're only finding about you. It's all internal.
I actually, I agree with you all, and I disagree with you all. I think that NPS actually can be valuable, but I agree that it's got to be done right? And it's got to be done in the right way. And you have to ask the right people. And that means everybody from the top of the stakeholder pyramid all the way down to the boots on the ground. And you have to ask at the right time. You shouldn't be asking an NPS question at the same date every year, because that's not relevant to everybody. You should be asking it based on the customer's journey, not on your need, your desire to understand their NPS. And to your point, Ariel, and this is why I disagree that it shouldn't be part of a customer health index, is because it shows that people are engaged, right? You can demonstrate some level of engagement if they are answering their NPS. Now, I think this attitude that NPS is no longer valuable is a result of people they're not doing it right. Right? They're not implementing it right. I had lunch yesterday, as a matter of fact, with my buddy Steve Bernstein, who can wax poetic about NPS and loves to wax poetic about NPS. So maybe we'll have another conversation with Steve at some point in the future. But all right, let's move on. Who is that from? Oh, Janelle. Thank you, Janelle. Thanks for the question. Let's see. David asks, I just started with CS. Health is an important part, but what are you looking at? Do you make a health score per milestone or always in total? Anybody want to, it depends. Anybody else want to jump in with something more meaningful than that?
I don't know if it'd be per milestone, but where they are within the journey. So and maybe that's what David, you're saying there is, definitely want to look at somebody during their onboarding phase, adoption phase, but also the more mature customers. And that's where you need to have that regular cadence of doing the assessment. So I think that's how I've done it in the past, but not specific to, I don't know if I guess you could say specific to onboarding. This is where their health is, because you're doing it while they're in that phase.
Well, you can look at, so for example, we had a customer that we determined that there was a point in the customer journey where a critical mass of individuals that were being trained on the product needed to consume a video, a 20-minute prep video prior to a 90-minute training class. And so what we would do is we use the consumption of that video, or the percentage of the team that consumed that video a week prior to the actual training class as a health metric, so that if it was below a certain threshold, the CSM needed to pick up the phone and call the key stakeholder and say, I'm concerned because a critical mass of your team has not consumed this 20-minute video, which is a prerequisite for this 90-minute training class, and we're concerned because if they don't consume it, we have a lower rate of adoption of this product, because a lot of the stuff that they really need to understand in order for this 90-minute training to be effective is covered in this 20-minute video. And our studies show that teams that consume the 20-minute video have a 98% adoption rate. Right. So you can use it that way for sure as a leading indicator. And we used it as basically a health score that, by the way, changed as the customer moved through that journey. So it's one of those, it depends.
Yeah.
Type of question.
You said it. You said it.
I said it. I know I did.
You went against your own rules.
It's not a rule. It's a rule for you. All right. Kimberly again asks, and I believe Kimberly left us, but she'll hopefully watch the replay. How do you incorporate CSM feedback sentiment in the health score then? Do you collect that feedback in an intentional way in your CRM? For example, each quarter have the CRM rate the chance of the client renewing on a 1 to 10 basis. Ariel, what do you got? What do you got for Kimberly?
So there's really two ways to do this, right? You can do it on a quarterly basis and store it somewhere, whether it's in Gainsight or your CRM or wherever, or you could do it on a more real-time basis. I'm actually a fan of doing it on a more real-time basis. We have a function in our CS tool where the CSM can just change the customer sentiment from green, yellow, or red based on what the current outlook looks like. And we find that more helpful for predicting churn earlier, or for changing the health score a little bit quicker than waiting till the end of the quarter.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this?
I mean, like I shared earlier, we actually had it set up as a cadence based on the segmentation of the customer, and tracked it. We tracked it in our CRM.
Awesome. Thank you. Joe asks, I have just been promoted to running my company's customer success department. The kicker is, this is a brand new department. I quickly created a color-coded health score, red, yellow, green, purple, purely based on field staff sentiment. This has been helpful. What should be the next metric to look at? David, you want to jump in?
From my perspective, I like really looking at adoption of the solution, where they're at in that. Now, depending on your solution, if you have a tool out there that can show, are the people utilizing the core functionality, at the proper stage of where they are in the journey, that's ideal. If not, then I'd go back and making sure that they're achieving their desired outcomes at those different phases of where they are in the journey. That way, you've got the sentiment, which is great. But what I've really seen is, if somebody's using the solution and they're achieving the expected value from that, that's a very powerful leading indicator of the health of that customer. And then you can grow from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anybody else want to weigh in?
I'm glad I'm 3,000 miles away from you, Andrew, but it depends. I mean, I like what David
It does depend, by the way. I'll support you on that.
I agree. Like, adoption's a great next thing to look at, but I would also say, what is your company's, what are you, a service? Are you a product? Like, what is your value proposition? What are the use cases, and what would indicate health? That may be something you're learning. Adoption is great, but that may look different. So I would just always say, like, kind of, what do your customers need and how do they need it delivered? And understanding that can help you understand what the next metric should be for health for your business. Like, usage is something we all talk about, but that might not be as important for some companies. Like, how maybe you're something it's just used once a month, and I'm totally like making that up, but.
No, you're right. I mean, I think I kind of put under the umbrella of adoption, outcome achievement, but I think it's really more outcome achievement more than anything. If you're achieving those outcomes you expected at the early stage, mid stage, that's delivering value, and that's critical. I just framed it under adoption, but outcome achievement's important.
Well, and here's a question that's kind of related. Keely asks, with the potential for a wide range of customer KPIs, how can we best scale the routines related to determining health scores? Potential for a wide range of customer KPIs. How can we best scale the routines related to determining health scores?
I think part of it comes back to our earlier conversation around data. What data is available? How easy is it to get? And can you automate it? It's that automation becomes critical when you're trying to scale. Yeah. Hopefully that answered it.
Thanks, Keely. Let's see. Jake asks, what's the best way to reach out to customers sometime after onboarding? A survey? Ariel, you were going to jump in on this?
No, don't do that. Have a meeting. I mean, don't do a survey.
I second that.
Don't do it.
Yeah, agreed.
Have an onboarding, like, what defines the end of onboarding, and have an onboarding wrap up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wrap up.
100%. You want to hit the done on that? Let's see. Any thoughts on using health score to drive a portion of CSM compensation?
Oh, I don't like that.
No.
Yes, in that, like I said earlier, in that you're doing it, not what the score is. So are you doing those health assessments? Should be part. I personally feel should be part of compensation.
Sorry, that's okay. We could have disagreements. Yeah. What's your Ariel? What's your issue with that?
Yeah, I totally disagree. I think
Yeah.
it's an internal, health scores are an internal tool that we're using to potentially predict churn. But at the end of the day, gross and net revenue retention is what we're driving for and why we have all these tools and why we're doing all the things that we're doing. So we should comp CSMs on gross and net revenue retention only, in my opinion.
Here's a question from Matt, and I'm assuming this question is based on, on the topic at hand. He doesn't specify that, but can you highlight the nuances in CS, I'm assuming CS health scores, for a product-driven company with slower contractual turns, 3, 5, 7-year contracts versus a higher renewal turn like SaaS year over year? Anyone want to take a stab at that? I mean, I think it still boils down to, are they getting value? Are they using? Are they engaged? I don't know how much.
You might measure it based on use case. If you have a 5-year contract, what are the use cases? What did they invest in you for? What's your brand promise? What's your value proposition? Your company always has whatever the use cases are of why someone invests. It's not just random. So maybe it has to be looked at over time. What's your most successful customer look like? Base it off of that, if just to get a baseline kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, it's like I said, the contract time is longer. I just think like you may want to look at use cases and what looks successful for those use cases.
I think you're absolutely right. Are you achieving the defined success criteria over time? Yeah. Because if somebody's not, even if it's a long-term contract, if they're not really getting the value out of it, what I've seen happen is a lot of times it just gets pushed back in the corner. And even though they may be paying for it, they may not use it and they do something else, especially as things start migrating more to the cloud.
And it's probably even more important that you have a more intense highlight on health scores with those longer tail customers, because the more it gets pushed back in the corner, more it gets forgotten about, the less likely you are to even have a chance of talking to them and getting any sort of renewal.
Exactly.
Or then again, because they paid you 5 years up front, they just don't care.
I was just going to go there. I mean, the fact that they made that initial investment, they're not seeing the cost right now. If you want to renew that, you better make sure that you're over time demonstrating value, or still demonstrating value.
Or maybe you don't. Maybe it's not worth it. But, at the end of the day, customers don't spend money just to spend money. They want to get a return on their investment, whether it's now or whether it's 5 years from now. All right. I think we got through half the questions, but I don't think we're gonna be able to get through any more. We did answer 13 of them. So once again, I'll make one more plug for the Slido poll. If you would click on that link real quick and add your input, I would appreciate it before we go. But we are at the end of our time for today. I think it was a great conversation. Sounds like from a lot of the people in chat that they thought it was a great conversation, but it's not what I think. It's what all of you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself or our guests or Success Coaching. And I want to thank all three of you for spending time with us and for the ideas, thoughts, insights, and best practices that you shared. One final note, great CS leaders know that they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created the CS Leadership Roundtable, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. We hope to see you again at our final event of 2022. I can't believe it's almost December. Our final event of 2022 on December 7th, when we'll discuss becoming an effective customer success leader. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your day, week, and month, everybody. See you soon.